You're listening to Out of Line with Caroline Lee, exploring offline realities with online personalities. Justina Blakeney is everyone's favorite interior goddess and guru. Designer, illustrator, author of the New York Times bestseller The New Bohemians, and soon-to-be-released New Bohemians Handbook. She's also the birth giver to the empire known as the Jungalow. She's a wife, a mom, and also manages to keep over 50 plants alive. I still don't know how she does it all. Justina and I both live in LA, but hopped on a phone call in the midst of our days of hustling to have this chat. Alrighty. Hey, lady. It's so amazing and fun to get to actually talk to you, because this is one of those things that I wish that I could see you and talk to you like every week for coffee, but who has time for that? So thanks for making time to do this.
I know, and we're neighbors too. It's even worse that we don't have time to get together. We live right across the river from one another.
I know. It's really sad. So the last time I think I saw you when we actually had time for a coffee was years ago. And since then, your empire has just like quadrupled, and everything that you do seems to be something totally original and unique and amazing. And so I'm just excited that you're taking time to chat about stuff that isn't work stuff.
Thank you. No, I was excited that you asked me. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So tell me, like, is there ever a thing? I know that you're someone who, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a designer, you're so many things, and you wear so many hats. And yet, you know, the content that you're making and that you're putting out on a hourly basis that seems so it's like it's flowing from you effortlessly. And yet I'm wondering, is there ever something that you go to start talking about online or feels really real to you in your own human experience and reality that just doesn't seem like something that fits really naturally to talk about online?
Well, when you first reached out to me about doing this podcast, I thought about that question quite a bit. Because I do feel like I'm very transparent with my audience, and that if something's kind of like going on in my life or in my head, and it's not something that I feel like I need to keep for myself or for my family or private in that way, I share it. So in a way, I feel like my audience has a sort of a clear, I feel like I can talk about anything with my audience is I guess what I mean. And that having been said, I sometimes feel like starting certain conversations opens floodgates for a kind of rhetoric that I just don't necessarily want to invite on my channels. Mm-hmm. Even though it might be something that's on my mind or something, that's happened to me. It's like, sometimes I'll want to talk about it and share. And I do that when I feel like either A, I can help somebody who's maybe going through something similar, or if I sort of feel like I just can't keep quiet about it for one reason or another. But if those aren't really if that's not really the case, my blog is about design and creativity and inspiration, and my channels on social media are also about those things. So I try to stick to those topics more or less, unless I've got sort of this little burn in my belly to to talk about something else. So in a way, I think that the different topics that I might want to talk about today with you that are sort of outside of that are not things that would surprise my audience that I'm interested in talking about. It's just more stuff that I just don't necessarily want my whole brand to be a talking point about race or about body image. Even though those topics are important to me, and I think everyone would agree, they come up periodically in my social feeds anyway, because they are important enough to me that I do sort of talk about them. So yeah, that was long-winded.
No, I love that. And I think it is, just as someone who follows you and has kind of witnessed the evolution of your feeds, there is so much honesty as knowing you in real life and knowing you online. There is, even when you post stories, it's you being you. And that isn't a common experience that I have, even with a lot of my friends and colleagues who are known online. I know a very different reality version of them to what I know online. So I love that it's almost, I don't know if you would say, use the word like gotten permission, but it's like your audience has given you permission. Like you've asked for permission as they've grown to be the real you. And they expect that. And so if all of a sudden you came out and said, I want to talk about this, and it was anything, probably they would probably go with it. Is that kind of your experience, or have you ever had them like be real mad?
I actually haven't had experiences of like them being quote real mad, but I also would maybe be, I think I would phrase it differently. I think you said, kind of like ask permission from my audience, and I think that feels off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ask permission from my audience. And a lot of bloggers do. A lot of people who have large social media followings are constantly asking their audience if this is okay and this is what they're doing, and they hope that they find it this way or that way. And I don't do that. I feel like it's like people will follow me if they like what I'm doing and they're interested in what I'm doing. And if they stop being interested in what I'm doing, then they'll stop following me. But I don't want to have to ask permission if like, what I'm doing is cool with them or something like that. And I will say that I feel like I have a very generous audience. Like I very rarely get negative feedback. I am very transparent, and I try to be my most authentic self. And therefore I think when I do feel like there's any blowback or anything like that I think a lot of bloggers sometimes are concerned about, and so therefore don't necessarily take risks with what they talk about or how they show themselves. I feel like that just brings me closer to my audience. And everybody tells me when they meet me in person and has been following, the blog for a long time is, oh, you're exactly like you, like you seem like you would be,
Yeah.
there's no disconnect. And so I think because of that, like, yeah, I mean, I can talk about lots of different issues, and I don't necessarily think that there will be very many surprises for people if they've been following me for a long time and like, read my more personal posts and stuff like that. So
right. And I don't know about you, and maybe this is an interesting thing to hear your take on, but sometimes I get that feedback as well. And to me, that kind of feels like the highest compliment, because to me, it seems like what I put online and what I put out into the, realm of online domain does feel real to me, and I care about it. And I try to put a balance of like the real stuff and the really pretty stuff. And so when someone says like, wow, you're exactly like you are online, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is like my ultimate dream, to have there be consistency and truth, because I don't want to have two disconnected realities that have nothing to do with each other,
Totally. I feel like it's very complimentary as well. And I also would say that I've also met a lot of people who are very different from their online personalities than they are in real life. And sometimes I'm like, wow, online you're awesome and offline you suck or something like that. But most of the time, what I find is that if there is a disconnect, it's not necessarily a disconnect between sort of like values or who they are. It's more of like a disconnect of volume, I almost want to say. Like sometimes people are very shy in real life, but don't seem shy when you know them from the internet. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I think the internet gives people permission in a way to feel a little bit more like they can express themselves.
Yes.
And in real life, sometimes those same people don't feel that way. And so anyway, it's a little tangential, but I guess my point is that I do feel like it's a compliment, because I want to be the same as I am online as I am off. But I do think that some people don't want to, or that's not their thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like a Colbert kind of situation where they like have a persona.
Yes.
And that's cool too. It's just a different vibe from my vibe.
Yeah. So on all of, I love tangents, so you're always welcome to tangent all you want. I love rabbit trails. But going back to what you were originally saying in terms of, race and body image, what role does that play in your online versus offline life? Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you can't like divorce yourself from yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
can't divorce, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like for me, I can't post a picture of myself without making a comment on body image. And I can't post a picture of myself without making a comment on race or pictures of my team or something like that. And it's so interesting how these things become politicized online. And sometimes I think for the better, and sometimes I think not. So for me, if I post a vacation pic of myself in a bikini, I'm making a statement about body image and
Mm.
about, some of my most popular posts, which is really funny because I very sort of rarely in the grand scheme of things post selfies or pictures of myself. But when I do, there's always a lot of comments and a lot of "you go girls" and a lot of like, "I wish I was as confident as you," or those types of comments, which is very flattering and awesome and also kind of sad and weird.
Yeah.
um, that someone who feels okay about the way they look posting a picture of themselves should be something that's like applauded as courageous or something like that.
Mm.
When uh, I don't think it is.
Yeah, yeah. So your energy when you walk into a room, like you're this like goddess, and I've heard people say like you're like an Amazonian goddess, like you just have this like larger than life presence. It's not like anyone would ever be around you and be like, wow, she's not comfortable in her skin. That's not real. That is not Justina. So was that ever a journey for you? Was that something that you personally, went through a process of learning to self-love, or is it just mostly like you said, kind of sad and weird that you do love yourself, and when you post as you are, people think it's courageous?
Well, it's so like self-confidence and body image and all that stuff is so complex. And I feel like I have always had a pretty decent sense of self, and I definitely think that part of that comes from my cultural heritage. I'm half black and half Jewish, and I think in both of those cultures, or maybe just in my family, in those cultures, I'll put a little ring around that. Um, it's not necessarily like the ideal body is a thin body necessarily.
Mm.
And I feel like, especially living in Los Angeles, like if you lose a few pounds, all you're going to hear from like everyone around you is, "Oh my God, you look amazing. You look amazing. What'd you do? You look amazing. You look amazing." And even when I'm like working out more or, watching what I eat more, sort of regardless of how I feel how you look is very much correlated with like your weight,
Mm.
in general. And I didn't grow up really with those kinds of frames around beauty and body image. I've always dated guys that liked thicker girls.
Mm.
I mean, for real,
Yeah.
and it was like, and having a little belly and having a little booty and having boobies and stuff were not necessarily like something that was like, oh, you need to lose weight. It just wasn't like that. It was like, oh, we like having something to hold on to. So I think maybe I got lucky, um, with sort of my family and then the guys who were either attracted to me or who I was attracted to growing up. But I never really felt bad about the way I look. And I think I just wasn't as hard on myself.
Mm.
And also just really busy.
Yep.
I've always been busy. And I feel like a lot of times people who fret a lot about their looks or, other things like that, it's like, well, if you were like super busy, you probably wouldn't be tripping off of it that much.
It's so true. I mean, there's something very true to be said about that. Like, you're too busy hustling and, painting and dreaming up your next, chair that you're designing to be not that I'm speaking for you, but just coming from observing you, it feels like you're not just sitting around being like, what do people think of my body shape when I walk in a room? You're like, girl, I got shit to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big thing. And it's not to say that I never struggle, and that I never look in the mirror and like, wonder how pregnant I look today, even though I'm not at all pregnant. Um, we all we all have issues. I'm not like immune from not feeling great, some of the time.
Yeah.
I just think that I'm a little bit more gentle with myself. I just sometimes I hear women talk the way they talk about themselves, and I'm just like, dang girl, like let up a little bit. You're being kind of mean to yourself,
Mm,
And I don't want to treat other people that way. So I definitely don't want to treat myself that way.
mm.
And I think it's really easy, especially with social media, to like fall down these rabbit holes. And I do it all the time also, where like you're all of a sudden in your discover feed and you like see some girl wearing a bikini and like you don't know why you're clicking on it, but like you find yourself clicking on it and then you're like scrolling through her feed and it's some random stranger and you're like, what am I doing? Like looking at this person's curly hair or looking at this plus size model and her outfits or whatever the different like rabbit hole that you end up going down is. And, inevitably or I should speak for myself, compare myself. Oh, well, oh yeah, well, she's making that shake. Oh, well, maybe I should try that shake. And, this, that, the other. But ultimately, like with the body image stuff, it's like I I think I look all right. It's like it's not that serious,
Yep.
and I think I look pretty cute, and it's fine. It's like what I mean. It's just like if I spent all the I feel like I hear women like agonizing it about body image and stuff like that like so much,
Mm.
and in some ways it I think it can kind of like creep in on you and sort of like take over, like it just saddens me when I'll hear other moms talking about, oh well, I don't want to go to the beach because well, I don't feel good about myself right now. And I'm like, dude, how are you going to let that like stop you from going to the beach?
Yeah, yeah, and as a mom, I mean, as a mom, like you're a mom, I'm not, but as a mom, that also, I was listening to like a 9-year-old girl this week. We were out to eat together, and she ordered a salad because she was like, I start school in a week, and I'm
No,
really, yeah,
I
and
can't hear you say this.
I know. And I was like, how are you 9 years old? And where is this coming from? And so for you as a mom and for you as someone who is, people look to you, even just you changing that conversation in any sort of way of being like you said before, it was so beautiful, just having grace for yourself and being gentle with yourself. I think you used the word gentle. Um, and that's it feels so basic. Like I just want to be like hashtag basic, but it's
Yeah,
not
it's
basic.
not.
It's
It's not
not.
basic. I mean, like I said, I get it. I definitely. It's not like I am like in love with myself 100% of the time, and I look at myself when I'm like getting out of the shower. Actually, we got a full length mirror for the first time two
Brave.
weeks ago.
So
Two
brave.
weeks ago, we haven't had one. I like haven't looked at myself in the mirror and like got out of the shower the other day. I have this full length mirror. I'm like looking at myself, and I'm like, damn. Damn, you're really embracing those curves, aren't you, Jay?
Hey,
Um,
hey, get it. Get it.
it's like it's fine. It's like it's all good. It's like, yeah, I could definitely exercise more and I could definitely eat better and I could have less cellulite and I could, not wear granny underwear and shave my armpit.
No,
you know
don't.
and that
Too
would
far.
probably like that would be cool and I'd probably feel like a little bit better about myself, but ultimately like what how much I weigh and how big my tummy is at a given time or how much it sags down over my C-section scar or any of those things doesn't define who I am as a person. It doesn't define who I am as a woman, and it doesn't even define what I feel like when I'm, up in front of a crowd of 500 people talking about design or at some kind of business meeting. It's just like I can't afford to let that be something that prohibits me from having fun, being a good mom, being a good designer, being a good person, and I think the mom thing is super key too. I mean, I never heard my mom talk shit about herself,
Mm,
and we have a very similar figure. And since like becoming a woman, I've heard so many women just complain, oh, and there's like there's a ribbon of fat over my knee, size 2 girls talking about, well, I feel fat for me. I'm like, you're 105 pounds and 5'9", like you're good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but the thing is that we're all good. And like there are so many conversations that ensue on social where it's like so easy to get stuck in these traps of reading all these comments, and people love to harp on, oh, but it's not healthy if you're fat, you're not being healthy. You're not being healthy. And it's so funny to me because everyone's like so concerned with everyone else's health, but not really.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Right?
It's
I mean, like all you have to do is get people talking about socialized healthcare and people are like, oh, take care of yourself. No, we're not here.
Exactly. I'm like, you know what? If people really gave two shits about taking care of other people, then there would be single payer healthcare in this country, and there isn't. So everyone can calm down about thinking, worrying about a girl's health, if she posts a picture of herself in a bikini and she doesn't, wear a size 4.
Yes. Retweet, preach, claps, all of it. I love it. I mean, I'm sure that with your daughter watching you just be you, she's picking up on attitudes and ways of doing life. But is that something that you ever talk about with her, or is she still young enough that it doesn't really come up? Like, have you guys ever talked about either race or body things together?
We talk about them as they come up, and it's always delicate and weird. And there are moments where, like, I remember. So my daughter's 5, for those of you who might be listening who don't know my story. She just turned 5. Her name is Ida. She's starting kindergarten next week, actually.
Oh.
And she'll say things like, "You're chubby, Mama," or "You have a fat belly," or like these kind of things. And I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this in a way that kind of shows her what's sort of like culturally appropriate or something, but how to deal with it in a way that's culturally appropriate, but also doesn't give her the idea that like chubby is like a bad word.
Right.
Right. And so like kind of owning my chubbiness. So one of my responses to her, if she says like, oh, you have a chubby belly, I'll say like, yeah, isn't it cute and soft?
I love that.
Like a teddy bear. You know what I mean? Just kind of like reframing these ideas of all these different shapes have their own kind of cuteness. And there isn't just one kind of shape that's the right kind of shape.
Yeah.
And, I've seen also too many moms and dads, say things like, oh, don't say that. Don't call somebody that. That's not nice. So it's already framing
like it's a bad thing
or something, like it's something really, bad and mean or something. And it can be. So it's like a tricky situation. But at the same time, I think it's a really important discussion to have early on. And as far as the race question goes, so again, I'm biracial. My dad's Black and my mom's white, of Eastern European Jewish descent. So I grew up. I'm bluish, basically, half Black, half Jewish, and my husband is, he's basically, a white guy. He doesn't like to define himself that way. So if he listens to this podcast, sorry, babe. He's of the human race. But just to give you a sense of sort of what my daughter looks like, she's got a little bit of flavor, but, her dad's white and I'm half white. So do the math. And so in talking about race, it's really interesting because I remember on MLK Day, she was asking some questions about Martin Luther King because she was hearing a lot about it. And so trying to like explain to her that 60 years ago, there was this guy who helped fight for rights for all people because You know how some people have dark, because, you don't even know if they notice this kind of stuff.
Mm.
You don't even know if they notice that some kids are darker than other kids. Like, they notice the weirdest things. So you also don't necessarily want to like draw too much attention to something.
Right,
Like,
right. And be like, you're different.
right?
Mm.
Like, so, I'll say like, well, how I'm kind of brownie, and you know how like Papa Charles, that's my dad, has like kind of darker skin, and you know how, you know, your other grandma, like Grandma Toots, has like lighter skin, and then the second you start explaining this stuff to a 4-year-old, you start realizing how crazy it is. So you're like, yeah, so the people with the lighter skin weren't being very nice to the people with the darker skin.
Oh.
Are you guys okay? like
Oh.
like it sounds like, there's like the Dr. Seuss story, the Sneetches, and they have bellies with stars, and some of them don't have stars upon theirs, and it's like, and they have this big fight, and it sounds like that. It sounds absolutely crazy
Yeah,
when you break
insane.
it. You're like, why? Wait, so you couldn't drink out of the same water fountain if you had darker skin? Like, Mama, I don't get it. I'm like, yeah, I don't get it either. So yeah, I mean, discussing this stuff with a little one is tricky and delicate, and I'm learning what works and what doesn't, and trying different things, and asking for help from my parents, who are amazing and developmental psychologists, and always have answers to these kinds of hard questions. So,
Oh my gosh, they sound amazing. I think I met your dad at maybe a Santa Monica launch once. And
yeah.
he was really rad. So
Yes.
yeah, but that sounds amazing. So they, as raising you, even as a mixed race marriage, did they talk about it? Was that something, even for you growing up, was that something that was on your mind? Or was it kind of like you were saying, where unless you brought it up, it wasn't really talked about?
Well, it's hard for me to sort of delineate when race started to become an issue in my life, but I can say I was pretty young. And I think already now things have changed so much. But, I grew up in Berkeley, which is a very multicultural city. It's a very liberal city, lots of mixed kids just in general. But still, I felt sort of like an anomaly. There weren't a lot, compared to other groups, there weren't a ton of mixed people. And I've always sort of gravitated towards other mixed people the same way other people of a single race might gravitate towards people of the same race. That's the only
Yeah.
way I can explain it. Sort of like we face a similar struggle isn't really the right word, but we have something immediately in common, like belonging to, two or more cultures,
Mm.
and what that means and what that feels like, and how you might code switch between the different cultures, and what it means to have two families that are sort of radically different culturally or otherwise. And I think all families deal with that to a certain extent. When you bring two families together, there's always going to be lots of cultural differences, no matter, even if they're of the same race. But I think in my family, because they're different races, different religions, there's a lot of difference between the two families. And I think in many ways, for me, it was isolating at times. I went to a Jewish elementary school, like a private elementary school that, had Hebrew lessons and Judaica studies and all that kind of stuff. And I always felt like an outsider there, being sort of the only person of color in my class,
Mm.
or the only person that sort of defined myself that way. And even in elementary school, I defined myself that way. I felt different from everybody else in many ways, and was treated differently sometimes. Like, I definitely have memories of teachers asking me like, "Oh, well, are you Jewish?" Sort of confused. And that had a lasting effect on me. I was like, here I am thinking I'm the same as all these other kids. My mom is Jewish, and in Jewish religion, the Jewishness is along a maternal line. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, yeah, my mom's Jewish just like your mom's Jewish. We're all the same. And so from a kind of an early age, I started to realize, well, people are looking at me differently,
Mm.
no matter how I see myself. And so that was probably the first time I was like, okay, I'm different. Then I started in high school, I went to Berkeley High, and it was a public high school, big high school, lots of all different kinds of kids. And I found myself feeling like I wanted to hang out with, more African American kids, more people who I felt like might feel more like me, but felt sort of immediately ostracized by that community at that school, mostly having to do with the fact that they already had their homies and their cliques and all that. I mean, it was high school. They all came from the same public schools. I was coming from some private school. No one knew who I was. I, between quotes, talked white and lived in the hills and all that. So it was like I was an outsider in many ways, both in the Jewish community and in the African American community, and therefore really identified as mixed, and sort of found a kind of homely crew of other mixed folks to hang out with. and it was mixed everything. Like, one of my really good friends was half Chinese, half Japanese, but she really felt mixed too. Her families on both sides had ostracized her immediate family, because of the tension between the Japanese culture and Chinese culture.
Wow.
So it runs so deep, you know what I mean? But I definitely sort of grew up feeling a little bit in between. And now as an adult, I'm 38. I lived abroad for 10 years. So I lived in Italy and Switzerland. And, I think that was sort of me wanting to feel like a total outsider.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Where like I could let my freak flag fly and be just a completely different, like so many people who I met in Italy had never met a Jew, never hung out with a Black person.
Really?
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. Lots of people, not even like few and far between, lots and lots of people.
Wow.
I met. That was the case. And I was American, which was another thing. And, so I think, my identity journey has been really interesting, as I think it is for everyone, but especially maybe particularly for people who who are multiracial or multicultural. And I think as a social media personality and blogger or whatever, being in the public eye in the way that I am, it's really interesting because there aren't that many of us.
Yeah, that's so true. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about in all of this. I mean, I feel like you just gave me a whole huge steak that I want to just sit and chew on, because there was so much gold in what you just said. On the days that I eat meat. But I think that in terms of that, yeah, you've gone from being someone who was a child of a mixed race family when that wasn't as common as it is now. But then, I mean, speaking for myself as someone who's lived overseas for a number of years, even that changes you. And I come back to the US kind of being like, hey, everyone, I might look the same on the outside, but in my brain, I also have another culture kind of speaking in my ear every now and again, going, well, like, that's not how they do it over there. Or why is that a cultural expectation, or, whatever it is.
Right.
So you've really got your multi-dimensional influences they're pretty impressive, really, but it makes sense that you don't have like a label that you're like, this is who I am, because you are someone who's lived all over the place and who has so many experiences from so many different cultures growing up, which I think is amazing, but I can see how it would be really difficult. And like you said, now you're a part of a weird thing that isn't necessarily really diverse. So what's that like?
Not even necessarily. It's just not.
Well, I was trying to be nice.
To who? To all the white folks that are listening?
I know.
I love you white folks. I love all you. I love everybody. No.
Yeah, that world that you're a part of that's super white? Tell me about it.
It's rough. It's rough. And it's sort of interesting and cool being biracial and looking at this. And then it's also kind of weird in a lot of different ways. And I'm just going to be really candid when I say that, like, I'll work on a lot of campaigns where it's sort of clear to me that I'm like the token person of color on the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
They'll be like, "Oh yeah, well we already have 4 white girls, so we definitely can't have 4 white people on this panel. We should hire Justina to be on it." And maybe that's a little bit of projection, but
Probably not.
but maybe not.
I don't
You
think
know what
so.
I mean? And so I also sometimes feel like, I don't want to be the token black person. That's not even how I identify myself. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And not because I don't want to identify myself that way, but because it feels inauthentic. If I were to call myself white, that would feel inauthentic, just as it feels inauthentic to call myself black.
Mm.
It's not a full story of who I am. That's denying my mother's whole side of the family and that whole culture that is a huge part of who I am. And so I really identify as being mixed. And I identify as being a person of color. And I think that's why I use that phrase so much, is because it sort of feels comfortable on me, where a lot of these other phrases don't feel comfortable on me. And so I feel weird about being that token person of color when I feel like well, first of all, it's annoying that there are these kind of weird quotas at all. And I think that, there are certain companies who are doing a good job of trying to like mix things up a little bit more. But for the most part, it's not even like a thought that enters these companies' minds. I work with so many large brands, and I've been to the headquarters of so many huge companies. And, I've even given talks at these kind of companies, and I'm looking around and I'm literally the only person of color in the room.
Wow.
And I'm talking about design studios. So
Wow.
it's like really shocking, and I'm looking around like, wow, I'm the only person of color here. That's so crazy. And then in working with a lot of these companies, you see what that means, the lack of diversity. You see how it's translated into the design work and the way things are talked about and the way things are done, because there's nobody there to say, oh, well, maybe we should include this other person.
Mm.
Or there's just you're not plugged in.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not even an issue of like black or white or Latino or Asian or any of that. It's more of like, you should want different kind of ideas that come from all different kinds of places and people with different backgrounds. Like for me, it's just so shocking how homogenous these things are. I go to trade shows and literally there'll be like 3 black people there at trade shows.
Wow, where there are like thousands of people there. Wow. Yeah, and that's really the word I was going to say, is like the design world, if that's what we're speaking about, is really missing out because it is so homogenous. And then when someone does come out with something that has a little bit of an influence from a different culture, it's suddenly so groundbreaking. But that's because it's like echo chambering, where it's just like, let's all get together and have the same ideas and the same references. So when there are people who get brought on as, air quotes, like token black guy or whatever people will say, which is offensive. I find it offensive because it's obvious. Like you said, it's like you're the only person in the room who isn't white. So it feels inauthentic. But what is the answer? What is the way to start bringing about more diversity so that it's genuine and that there is a space and a platform for equality and hearing each other? And how do you do that and do it well?
You have to make an effort. I don't think that these companies make an effort at all. I think that it's an afterthought, if it's a thought at all. I also think that you can tell when people or companies are making an effort, and I can give some examples.
Yeah, I would love to hear.
Design Sponge. Grace
Yes.
makes an effort to include different types of people.
Yep.
From all backgrounds, all ages, all sexual orientations. It makes an effort, and I think her work is more powerful and stronger because of it. I think Refinery 29 is doing an amazing job of inclusion, and it's not hard. You just have to be thinking about it.
Mm.
I think the problem is that these companies aren't thinking about it. I mean, I can look through the social feeds of a lot of the companies that I find to be inspiring from a design perspective. And I look on these feeds and I feel excluded. I don't see myself represented. I don't see anyone brown, black, anything. I have to scroll for weeks and weeks and weeks to find one person of color. They're sizist, they're racist, they're ageist. And I think people are starting to get tired of it. And I
Mm.
think it's starting to change. And I think we have social media to thank for that. But I really think it's as easy as making an effort. I mean, so many companies that I know hire from, the same pools, right? It's the
Yep.
same people kind of like bouncing around. The second you go outside of that for one hire, you're already starting to stir the pot.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because then all of a sudden you can tap into that person's network.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, even just that one voice is such a powerful voice to have. I know for me, when I build my team, diversity is an important part of my team. Like I want different kinds of people from different backgrounds on my team because I think that makes me stronger.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I've even noticed that about you and your team. And I think it's so beautiful, but I almost hate that I noticed that. I almost hate that when I get together with your team, I'm like, oh, wow, look, they're so diverse. Like, that's so sad that I noticed that as like a good thing. And I think like you said, it's not hard. It's about trying. But, I photographed you for Grace's book and I photographed so many of the people in her book. And you're so right. Every single time she would send me another email of, you know, can you go meet this person and photograph them? I was always so excited because I knew it wasn't going to be a box. It wasn't going to be like a rinse and repeat. It's going to be the same thing over and over again. It was beautiful and it was really empowering to get to be a part of that. So I love that you mentioned her as someone who is a real advocate. She's an advocate for just humans in general.
Totally. And an advocate for diversity. And that's for me, that's really what it's about. And I don't want to knock my my white brothers and sisters either. Like
Mm.
it's really it's not about who's more this, who's more that, who knows this, who knows that, who went to this college or who has this many followers. It's really about the strength of the group
Mm.
and what we are all bringing to the table that someone else might not be bringing to the table. And I think that together we're stronger. And so when I go to blogger events and, these kinds of things where there's like a new product launch or something like that, and I look around and I mean, Joy and I joke about it a lot. Joy from Oh Joy, she's a good friend of mine. She's also mixed, um, but, Asian. And, or actually maybe Joy's Thai and her fully Thai and her kids are mixed. I think that's what it is. Her kids are her Thai and Korean. But she, we kind of look at each other like we're the only people of color in the room, like consistently.
Yeah.
And it's like no one else even notices. No one notices
Mm.
at all. It's not a thing for everyone else. But we know, like I notice every time. And it's like, it's tiresome.
Mm.
At a certain point. And it's not to knock anybody else or the hard work that other people are doing, but it's also just exhausting to be that token person or like, oh, well, we need a Black person on here. So like, let's call Justina.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so sad and it's so frustrating. And that also puts like kind of a weird amount of pressure on me in certain ways and in certain circles. Like I'm supposed to represent all the like people of color.
Right.
And so it's, I don't know. I mean, it's tricky. It's very, very strange. And I'm such a weird person too. I mean, everyone's weird when you get to know them, but like, I do have such a varied history and I've lived all over the world and I don't know. It just shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't. And like what I'm hearing you say, at least that's something that resonates for me, is just awareness and like the mindfulness of choosing if I'm having an event, who's coming and why? Why am I including them? Is it because I value who they are and I value their input? Or is it because, oh shit, I better have some quick diversity so that no one says that it's like a white girl?
Exactly. And I think, I have some projects going on where we're hiring models.
Mm.
And I have to tell people time and time again, like they'll send me model options and I'm like, these girls are beautiful and it's awesome, but can you please send me some more options with more women of color? Can you please send me some options of some women who are different sizes? Like I have to go out of my way every single day as a designer to make sure that there is inclusion in what I do. And If you see a wedding line of mine, you're going to see a gay couple
Mm.
in that. You're going to see people of color. If you see a clothing line that I have coming out, you're going to see models of color. You're going to see models who are not, all the same size. For me, it's about diversity and about inclusion. And in order to make that happen on my end, it takes more work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to remind people. I have to send more emails. I have to take longer to get more options. I have to annoy people.
Yeah.
I have to be on the ball about it. But it's so important to me because we're all looking at these images and we're all judging ourselves based on what we see. And we're all deciding what we can be a part of and how much we can grow and how fat we are or how thin we are or how pretty we are, or how ugly we are based on what we see in the media. And I'm a part of that. So for me, it's extremely important that we are looking at something that feels real, something that feels invigorating, something that feels diverse, something that feels inspiring, and something that represents who I am as a person, which is diverse. I am mixed. Inside me am diverse.
Yeah.
And we all are. And it's so tiresome how basic and vanilla everything is.
Yeah, it's really true. And, Justina, like, thank you for that, because I do really notice it. And I know other people do too. And even if they're not aware of it enough to verbalize it, it's still making an impact. Even just been looking at a feed day after day that just looks the same has one effect on people. I was listening to a podcast. It was On Being a few months ago. And there was a woman on it that was a sociologist, and she was talking about how important it is for our brains to even see images of people who are different to us, because even if we're not aware of it, it creates sort of like brain waves that make us more accepting and make us, as we go through our days, we remember, oh, there are people out there who are different to me, and that's okay. And so I noticed that you put work into that. I noticed that as the years go on, you do have a really beautiful team of people who are all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors, and that's really, really amazing. And that everything that you create is really obvious that that's something that you stand for. So even if it's something that you don't talk about in your feed all day every day, like, hey guys, this is something that matters to me, your work speaks for itself, and it's obvious that you're making a difference there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because a lot of companies are worried about it affecting sales.
Really?
And I think about it in the exact opposite way. Like, I have made a name for myself by choosing to do things differently from how mainstream people are doing it. Everyone's going minimal. I'm going maximal. Everyone's going flowers. I'm going plants. Everyone's going skinny white girls. I'm going fat black girls. Like, do this. So, I mean, for me, it's like, it's also just exciting. It's exciting. And what I found is that, contrary to what many people think, people are afraid to take risks and step outside of, oh, but this is how we've always done the campaign and we're successful. Why would we switch things up? And the problem is that when you stay with that status quo kind of thinking and you're afraid to, shake things up, you don't grow.
Yeah.
And you don't change. And not only is that boring from a sort of business perspective, in my opinion, but it's also unhealthy because you're stagnant at that point. You're like stagnant water. And you need to be able to shake things up and progress and grow and change.
Well, and you do very well. So thank you for being an example. And I mean that. I'm not just like
smoke up my ass.
I'm not. This is the first time I've done like acknowledgement hour on the podcast, but I mean it. And I just think it's really, even when I was thinking about starting this podcast at first, it was like, this is going to be a podcast for women. And then I was like, no, I want to be inclusive. I want to have everyone. I don't want it to be like, sorry to all my gay friends and sorry to, like, no, I'm sorry. This is about doing something different. And even if that means that it's more of a niche thing, like you said, you're creating something weird that is totally different, which might mean that there are fewer people who, it's not like mass marketing. That's
the myth. That's the myth.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, people are like, oh, but if we put a Black girl on the cover of this magazine, we're not going to sell as many copies. It'll be more niche. We'll make a statement. So it's okay. But that's actually where I think the myth is. And that's why it's harder to get some of these companies to take risks, is because they feel like it's going to be more niche.
But then it isn't. You're saying it isn't.
I'm saying it isn't. I'm saying it's forward. So it might take a minute for things to hit, but it will hit.
Yeah.
It hits. And I also think it's a myth that, you have to look the same as someone to be able to relate to them. So as a mixed person, I feel this way so often. I remember being a little girl and watching the Cosby Show and looking at Lisa Bonet, who's not that much older than I am, but still like looking at her and thinking, that's what I'm going to look like when I grow up. Because she was the only like mixed person.
Wow.
who I sort of related to as being the same as me. She's half Black, half Jewish. So I was like, oh, she's like me. That's what I'm going to look like when I grow up. But like for me, people who relate to me and relate to the Jungalow and my brand and all that, it has to do with a spirit more than a color. It's a feeling, of being free and a little bit wild.
I love that.
And in the beginning, when I started, people were like, oh, this is too, like when I was trying to pitch my book for the first time, people were like, this is too niche. This is too niche. This is too niche. And I'm sitting there looking at my watch and I'm like, I know y'all think this is niche now, but in 2 years is what everybody's going to be doing and seeing. So it's not niche, it's forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying and I agree with you. And the way that I would reword what I was trying to say is that it's not that the Jungalow as a brand is for everyone. Like there are some people who are minimalists who are going to be like, ugh, that's not me. I don't want that many plants in my house. But they're going to look at what you stand for and look at you as a brand and respect it because it's doing something new and different. And they might say to themselves, how does she do that? How does she stay fresh and original? And how is she creating new things all the time that are getting so much more attention than what other people are doing? And whether it appeals to everyone or not, I would say, respect it. That's what I would say is what I meant more by niche.
I'll take it.
Yeah, in the sense that not everybody is going to be like, I am a boho queen, but they are going to notice it over time and be like, wow, that Justina girl, like, what is she on? Because it's real good. Like she's churning out some really new ideas, and I don't know where they came from, but I want what she's having.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. We work hard to try and not water things down. It's not a solo mission. I have an incredible family and an incredible team who support me and support the brand and help. And I think that the more we're able to have these kinds of conversations and talk about things like race and body image without it being such a polarizing subject, like that's what's so shocking to me. Like even just on like if you look at like Ashley Graham's, who I love, by the way. Ashley, if you're listening to this, you're a queen. You look on her, for those of you who may not know, she's a very, very big model right now. She's on the cover of, all kinds of magazines all over the country and world. And she's thick and curvy and gorgeous. And, you'll read these comments on her feed and it's polarizing. There'll be like, most of them I think are overwhelmingly positive. Like it's just nice to finally see someone who has a different body shape than what we're used to seeing on the cover of magazines. But then of course you have the people who are like, she's unhealthy or, too fat or, whatever the comments are. Mm. But the point is to be able to open up these kinds of conversations in a way that's respectful and in a way where we're listening. And I think with that, and I think social media and Instagram in particular has helped so much with particularly brands understanding that there is a market for people that look different and people who feel different and people who are different sizes and all that. I think it's the engine of what's changing things and why we're seeing more Ashley Graham's kind of pop up on our magazines and stuff. Without social media, this just wouldn't have happened. I mean, we grew up in the 90s, like it was Kate Moss, it was Linda Evangelista, it was all those women on the cover of these magazines and none of them looked anything like me. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would have been for me to have seen Ashley Graham on the cover of a magazine when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine?
Like that's empowering. That's exciting. That's empowering. That's fresh. And that is the power of social media, because they are able to see that hundreds of thousands and millions of people around the country find that to be beautiful
Mm.
and aspire to be that.
Mm. Yep.
And here they are thinking that everyone is aspiring to be Kate Moss, which is cool. Kate Moss is rad. She's got great style. She's beautiful, but she's just not the only prototype of what people are interested in looking like.
Right. And not everyone identifies with how she looks, even if they wanted to. Even if they were skinny white girls, there very few of them can look like Kate Moss. And that's one thing that I really love about social media and about, I think, millennials, at least the ones that I know pretty well. There is a real desire for something relatable and for something that feels real and genuine. There is such a push against photoshopping and a push against retouching or creating something that doesn't feel real. And so with social media, I'm really interested in that juxtaposition of the reality that we create, that we put out, and the reality that is, and whether that gap is going to get smaller and smaller as more and more people are just getting really real and genuine online, or whether that kind of stays the reality versus the online reality.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I was looking at Solange's feed, another woman who I adore. Solange, if you're listening, you're a queen.
If you're listening, please come on this podcast. Oh my gosh, she's my ultimate.
I love her. She's so fabulous. She posted a picture a few days ago with her whole face covered in hives. And you look at something like that and it gets more likes than the ones of her looking super fly and all done up, and I mean, whatever, she's so natural and so rad anyway, but it's interesting to see that, because people are so hungry for realness and for relatability. And we're fed so much fakeness all day long, and everyone can relate to a feeling of, I have hives, or, oh, I have a huge zit on my face. And like, we all go through all that, and it's so much cooler to just share it than to just only share pristine pictures of yourself. It's just like, that's so boring.
Yes.
It's so much more exciting, so much more fun, so much more alive and dynamic to be able to feel free enough to share sides of you that are less than, between quotes, less than, because to me that's more than.
Right. Yeah, but it's like you said, dimensions. Like, we humans, we're multidimensional, and online has such an easy out if someone chooses to be kind of 2D and only share what they want to share. And so it does take a little bit of bravery. It does take a little bit of self-confidence and kind of groundedness. And like you were saying before, like gentleness with yourself, to be like, hey, if I do get a hater, if I do get someone that says, you need to be more healthy because your body doesn't look healthy, or whatever the haters are saying.
Or just like, you're fat and you shouldn't be wearing a bikini, which is what someone said to me last time. It's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It does not hurt my feelings. And I think that's a really important thing too, is that, like, I had, over 1,000 people comment about how awesome they think I looked. So the few people who comment like, you're fat and you shouldn't be wearing that, like, that bounces right off me. I'm like that. Actually, I feel sad for people like that. That's sort of how they spend their time.
Yeah.
That's a sad way to be.
Yeah, and I agree.
That's hard. So I have, in Yiddish they say, I have rachmanis. I have pity on people like that.
Yeah. My hope is that the more that people start being genuine and being authentic and sharing, imperfect selfies in bikinis, that there will be enough of a shift that most people are like, oh, there's no space for trolls. There's no space for haters, because we're all in this together and we're all humans, and meeting each other, like you said, on the level of what we do have in common and not focusing on what we don't is where the magic happens. That's where really incredible collaboration and just like fun, because it's not like you're different in this way or you should feel bad about yourself because of this. It's like, wow, you're an awesome human. let's meet at that field and go from there.
Yeah. And I love how different you are from the way I am.
Yes.
And that's gives us this sort of yin yang thing. And that's, yeah, I mean, everyone's got so many opinions. It's always going to be a mystery to me why people feel the need to like share so many of their own opinions about other people on their feeds.
Oh.
Like, you know, but whatever, it's all good. I mean, I think discussion is good. And I think that in general, for me, I know a lot of people look at, you know, images on social media and feel longing or feel less than. And I think for me, it's actually had the opposite effect. I think I've felt more empowered by the images I see on social media than the other way around. Yeah, you know, and there's nothing wrong with taking like a cool Photoshop selfie of yourself either. Like,
hell no.
It's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's all good. It's just like, that's just like you get dressed up to go to a wedding sometimes and you're feeling fly and whatever. And that's one side of yourself, and that's awesome. And then also it's fun to share the other side. It's all the different sides. We're multidimensional people.
Yes, we are. Preach, girl. Preach. I love that. I love that so much. Stick around for part 2 of this discussion, where we'll dive into the online portion of social media realities. This episode of Out of Line was produced by me, Caroline. All sound editing, engineering, and original music composition by Jaden Lee. And a big thank you to Cat Footwear for working with Out of Line this season. Hit subscribe to get the next episode on your mobile device when it drops next week. And if you love what you heard, please whip out a review, will ya?